It turns out there's an epidemic of loneliness in our country today. Over half of Americans report feeling lonely. Here in Austin, the number is higher, it's 60%. And among young Austonians, like you guys, it's over that, it's worse than that. So we can't fix this problem overnight, but there's one way you can make a big difference very quickly, and that is by finding the right life partner. That is a long-term romantic relationship or spouse. I went through this search process myself a while ago and made some discoveries. So in the next 12 minutes, I'm going to give you the top 6 discoveries I made that will speed up your search tremendously. Now, you may already have a life partner, but your life is long. You may someday need to find another one. So pay attention anyway. Okay. So first, a few caveats. A lot of this relates to straight couples, but I would argue the fundamentals apply to everyone. And I'll be making generalizations. I'll say, men do this, women do that. Hey, it's a 12-minute talk. These are probabilities, not 100% rules. And finally, some of this will sound kind of old-fashioned. That's because the biochemical operating system that works the love process is very old. It hasn't changed substantially since this cave painting was painted. Okay, if you only remember one thing, here's the most important thing. Men and women form their long-term pair bonds very differently, okay? On this next slide, I'm going to show you, you'll see 2 hormones. These 2 hormones, in the upper left is oxytocin. You've heard of oxytocin. It's the bonding hormone. It's the cuddle hormone. This is the hormone that women use to make their long-term pair bonds. When a woman has an orgasm with a man, she gets a lot of oxytocin. This is why women tend to fall in love with men they have sex with. Men also have oxytocin, and it has some effect on them also, but it's not how they make their long-term pair bonds. Down on the bottom right is vasopressin. This is what is currently thought to be the chemical that men use to make their long-term pair bonds. And here's the thing. He needs to have it over a period of time, and here's the distressing thing. If he has an orgasm with the woman in question too early in the process, the vasopressin level drops, and the long-term pair bond is inhibited. So, how do these 2 different processes interact with today's dating culture? Well, it's not good. In fact, it's a disaster. Okay, so here's a typical situation. You have a couple. They've been dating. They may have been living together for years. And at some point, she's been getting loads of oxytocin. She has formed a very strong pair bond with this man. She's thinking, okay, this is it. She's thinking long term. She's thinking, well, someday we'll get married. Someday maybe we'll even have children. But when she brings this up to him, he's just not feeling it. He thinks she's a great person, and they're having a great time, and she's a great roommate. But he's, right? But he's just not picturing her as, the mother of his children. So she gets angry. She can't understand this. In fact, neither of them understand this. Her attitude is he, quote, can't make a commitment. You may have heard this. He can't make a commitment. I would say, well, maybe that's not the problem. Maybe he just didn't get enough vasopressin early in the relationship when the long-term pair bond was forming for him. So, yeah, it's not a good, it's really, when I figured this out, I'm like, oh my God, this is awful. So, all right. So we have to ask our question, why is the system like this, right? Why would his biochemistry appear to have a built-in delaying function on forming this long-term pair bond? Could there be any genetic advantage to him in having this delay in his biochemistry? And I think there is a plausible answer. This may not be right, but this is the best hypothesis I've been able to think of or read anywhere, which is on the next slide. I think this number explains the problem. Okay. This number is the non-paternity number. This is the number of babies whose genetic father does not match their legal or announced father. Now, this has been going on since the dawn of time. It's only very recently that men have had any certainty about which children are really theirs genetically. So all our biochemical systems are set up to deal with the old situation, where men did not know who their children were. Okay, so how could this number possibly explain this bizarre delaying function? Well, think back 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago. What type of woman would be very anxious to have sex very quickly? You can think of different ones. The one I'm thinking of is a woman who is recently pregnant, but the father whose child is not stepping up. He's out of the picture. You know, if you go back far enough, it wasn't just a social stigma, it was a friggin' disaster for her to be an unwed mother. It was the end, you know, it was an absolute disaster. However, she can solve this problem. She still has a chance. If she can find an honorable but gullible man and sleep with him fast enough, and then at the shortest possible time announce she's pregnant, she may trigger a marriage proposal and solve her problem and come out of this perfectly fine. So, you can see that a man who has a built-in delaying function in his long-term pair bond formation might be less likely to fall for this ploy. And this has genetic consequences in terms of the propagation of his genes. So over a period of generations, you could see how this could add up. So that's, I'm not sure this is true, but this is the best hypothesis I've heard. So how do we solve this problem? I mean, we've got a serious mismatch between today's dating practices and forming long-term pair bonds. Well, as far as I know, there's no technical workaround. There's no fix. In other words, we can't just take men and say, all right, we're going to inject you daily with vasopressin. I don't think they're going to sit still for that. So we're just going to have to work with this natural system, for now anyway. So fortunately, Wikipedia has the answer, which is if you look up baseball metaphor for sex, you will see it's laid out first base, second base, third base, fourth base. The suggestion is you stop at second base. Now, is this awkward? It's incredibly awkward. Remember being in junior high school? It's like that. However, dating is awkward anyway, so it's just another awkwardness of dating. Okay, that was number one. It's the most important one. I'm going to move very fast through the others. Hormonal birth control. Most hormonal birth control methods work really well, and the reason is they cut off the fertile peak. There's a problem with that, which is if you show men or women photographs or play voice recordings of women at different times in their cycle, it's the fertile ones who are the most attractive to men. Even women can tell that. So ladies, if you're having difficulty, consider getting off the hormonal birth control for a while. Okay, rejection. Dating's about being rejected all the time. Person A rejects B, B rejects A, or you both reject each other. When there's no rejection, we don't call it dating anymore. Now you have a relationship. So it turns out that in immunology, if your immunological systems are too far apart, there's no romantic attraction, no physical attraction. If they're too similar, there's none. It has to be just right. So when you're rejected, just blame immunology. It may be true, and that way you don't feel bad and you can keep going. Okay. This is a common error that I see, especially women making, which is they'll say, well, I dated him, he was nice, but there was no chemistry. And I'll say, how many dates did you have? 1 or 2? It turns out that the men that women have an immediate sexual attraction to, a physical attraction to, they tend to be the players. That's because women's reaction makes men become players. That enables them to be players. It turns out that the nice guys who are not players don't necessarily trigger that in you in 1 or 2 dates. It can take a long time. It can take 2 months. I know, because that's how long it took me one time. But then I fell like a ton of bricks. So, ladies, if you want a nice guy who's not a player, you have to quote, the saying is, give the nice guys a chance, which means at least 2 months of chance. Okay, here's another problem that we all have. We're all programmed for this, men and women. We're all programmed for the beautiful people, right? The women all want the tall guys. The men want the woman with the pretty face and the perfect figure. Well, if you think about all the things you're looking for you take the world and then you start to peel away at it. You say, all right, sexual orientation, age, physical location, intelligence, mental and physical health, all these character traits. And then on top of all those filters, you add this, and must be beautiful or tall. You end up over-constraining the problem. We can't all have the beautiful, tall people, okay? So this is something we have to actively overcome for ourselves and say, well, if I'm going to give up something, what am I going to give up? I would argue, try to give up the tallness or the beauty. Because if you give up any of these, you're going to be really sorry. And if you give up mental health, God forbid, okay. Polyamory, okay. So this is having multiple long-term partners. In the interest of time, I'm going to make this very short. Number one, very few people can make this work, and the reason is jealousy. It's one of the most powerful, unpleasant emotions that we have. And number two, a technical point, when the women in the left-hand situation, where there's multiple women with one man, sometimes they decide, I want my own man. And then they go out and try to find one. Well, biochemically, she's presenting as a woman who already has a mate because she already does have a mate. So in her body language, her biochemistry is all telegraphing, quote, married woman. So if she really wants her own man, she might want to step out of the polyamorous relationship. Last but not least, it's hard to find a mate here at a conference because you can't walk up to somebody and say, are you single? What's your sexual orientation? Do you want children? You can't do that. That's what online dating is good for. But if you want to experiment, you can write on your badge, SK for single want kids, SN, single no kids, GK, gay want kids, GN, gay no kids. Let's see if we can get at least one great relationship out of this conference. Okay, in closing, 3 offers to you. We're going to pick up this conversation and continue it tomorrow morning at 9:30 right here in this room, so I hope you'll join us. That will be with Seth and Mikey. It'll be a wide-ranging, interactive conversation, so if you disagree, join in and let us know. Number 2, if you want my book draft on this, just drop me an email and I'll get it out to you. It's fun to read. It's targeted mainly at women, but men have told me they found it very useful, so guys, feel free. And last, okay, I want to give you a little mantra, a 4-word mantra, to remember when you're trying to decide, well, is it time? It's in that moment of passion. You're trying to decide, should I take this relationship and consummate it physically, or is it better to wait? Okay, 4 words. Try to remember this. Easy come, easy go. Thank you very much.